Hey guys, this is God of Politics, and welcome back to a brand new video. But before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But in today's video, I will be yet again talking about the 2021 mayoral race in New York City. Now, for those of you that don't know, I'm actually from New York City, and so this actually is quite an interesting race, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen in this race because we do have the primary that is coming up very, very soon. The primary is going to be on June 22nd using a ranked choice voting system, which New York City voters approved, I believe, 2 years ago now. It was in the 2019 elections. You can rank up to 5 candidates. And so we've got a lot of candidates running for the Democratic primary. Of course, you do have a Republican primary, but not going to be too significant, not going to be much of an, it's not going to have much of an impact at all because the Democrats going to end up getting 70% of the vote, maybe a little bit less because back in 2017, Bill de Blasio only got 66.5% of the vote against Nicole Maliotakis, who's now a representative from the 11th Congressional District, which does cover Staten Island, but Bill de Blasio, not that popular for mayor, not as unpopular as people on, say, Twitter would make him out to be, but he's probably around 50% approval as of now. But it has gone up recently, I do believe. But that's a little bit irrelevant because we're talking about the 2021 mayoral race. Now, looking at these different candidates here, there are a number of candidates here that we can list. There's Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough President, Sean Donovan, former Director of OMB, and former U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Catherine Garcia from the NYC Department of Sanitation, also endorsed by the New York Times, Ray McGuire, a Citigroup executive, Diane Morales, a very progressive activist, Scott Stringer, the comptroller, former Manhattan Borough President, former state assemblyman. He's also quite progressive, but he did have allegations of sexual assault, which have really hurt his campaign, I do believe. Maya Wiley, who was a new school professor, as well as, some of these other jobs, former counsel to Bill de Blasio, and Andrew Yang, of course, the biggest name, the one with the most name recognition in this group. And we can look at, of course, the fundraising numbers, and I don't have them up here, but the fundraising numbers for Andrew Yang does corroborate the fact that he does have the most name recognition because Andrew Yang does have the most fundraising, but only about half of that fundraising is from New York City itself. The candidate with the highest from New York City, I believe, is Diane Morales, followed by Scott Stringer, so they both do have local appeal, whereas Andrew Yang's is a lot more national appeal because of the name recognition that he got from running for president, but regardless, he still does have a lot of money to spend. I've seen a lot of ads from Andrew Yang. I've seen a lot of ads from Scott Stringer, as well as some from Ray McGuire, a lot from Sean Donovan, but I have not seen any from Catherine Garcia or Eric Adams, so that is quite interesting. Of course, that's anecdotal, but it is still of course, something that I should know. So looking at these endorsements here, Eric Adams has a lot of endorsements. He is the borough president, so he does have a lot of endorsements from assembly members from the Brooklyn area, as well as Tom Suozzi, who is a representative from the 3rd Congressional District, which actually doesn't have any of Brooklyn, but he still did give his endorsement to Eric Adams. We also have a lot of local officials here, individuals, labor unions, who he's got a lot of endorsements from. Sean Donovan doesn't have too many. Catherine Garcia doesn't have too many, but she does have the New York Times endorsement. Ray McGuire does have not too many endorsements, but he did get an endorsement from LL Cool J and Spike Lee and Jay-Z, which is quite interesting, and Samuel L. Jackson. All quite interesting endorsements for a guy that was a former executive from Wall Street. Diane Morales has not too many endorsements. Those are mainly labor unions, organizations, progressive groups that have endorsed her. Scott Stringer had a lot of endorsements withdrawn because of his sexual harassment allegations, and he still does have a decent number of endorsements, but many of them were withdrawn. He had endorsements from many key figures like Jerry Nadler, Adriano Espaillat, Jamal Bowman, many other labor unions. Of course, he does still have a lot of the endorsements from the labor unions, I believe, including the Teachers Union of New York, which is a very powerful union. Maya Wiley, also quite progressive. She does have a decent amount of endorsements here. And Andrew Yang, of course, does have a decent amount of endorsements, but not as many as you would think for a frontrunner. The 2 representatives he has endorsed him, who have endorsed him is Grace Meng, who is an Asian representative from New York's 6th Congressional District, and Richie Torres, a Hispanic representative from New York's 15th Congressional District. A lot of state legislatures, local officials, and individuals. A lot of these you may know: Anthony Scaramucci, Amy Schumer, Charlemagne the God, Martin Luther King III, who is, I believe, like the grandson of MLK Jr., And so there's a lot of candidates that have been endorsed by many different people, but how does that translate into the polls? So including undecideds, we can see that Yang has pretty much had a lead for this entire time, but it has fallen a lot recently, and we can see this light blue line is actually Eric Adams, who actually has overtaken him in the polling average, which is quite interesting. We had Scott Stringer, who gained in the polling averages a lot and was actually approaching Yang and Adams, but then he has fallen a lot, and he's even fallen below Catherine Garcia, who with the New York Times endorsement seems to have gained some traction recently, and a lot of the other candidates are kind of just in below the pack, similar to the 2020 presidential race, which is quite interesting. But without the undecideds, you can see here Adams has taken a slight lead. He did take a slight lead before, fell a lot, went back up, and that's partially due to the fact that you don't have too many polls, and a lot of the polls are internal polls, but he does have a lead now. Stringer's fallen a lot, Catherine Garcia's gained a lot. The rest of them have pretty much stayed pretty stagnant here. Now, looking at the actual polls, of course, as I mentioned, it is ranked choice voting, so the candidate with the least percentage of the votes does get knocked out, and then their second choice votes go to the candidate they're choosing. So after all the ranked choice voting has been done, we can see for this Change Research poll here, the most recent poll we have, it was a 50-50 tie between Eric Adams, the second place candidate, and Andrew Yang, the first place candidate. So that is very, very interesting. We had another Change Research poll from just before that showing Eric Adams with actually a 6-point lead. We had one from Benenson Strategy Group showing Yang with a 12-point lead. Ipsos showed Yang with a 14-point lead against Stringer, who was actually in second place in this poll. And Slingshot Strategies, going back here way into March, Yang had an 18-point lead, and you can clearly see Yang's lead used to be a lot bigger than it is now. But what's going to be interesting is how the ranked choice voting is going to affect things. Who are voters going to put second? So, for example, Scott Stringer, a very progressive person, but many of the people supporting him are more establishmentarian because Scott Stringer has been around politics for quite a while now. People know him. People know him in New York City, whereas Yang is a newcomer. So are Scott Stringer voters who have stuck with him after the sexual assault allegations going to put someone like Yang, who's running on a more anti-establishment platform, are they going to put someone like Yang second choice? I don't really see that. I think it's much more likely they put someone like Eric Adams second choice, despite the fact that Eric Adams is a much more moderate figure because he is also a more establishmentarian figure like Stringer, despite their pretty strong political differences on a number of issues, even though they're in the Democratic Party, of course. And so, you know, it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens. I think, of course, people who vote for people like Dianne Morales, Maya Wiley, will probably end up putting someone like Stringer second, maybe because he's also quite progressive. Maybe they put someone like Catherine Garcia. But, you know, it's kind of hard to believe that Eric Adams has done so well, and that kind of corroborates what I'm saying. People are less focused on ideology and more on, you know, who's focused on them, who's going to come in and say, I'm going to fix the city. And people see Eric Adams as that choice in a lot of scenarios, and people see Yang as a lot of that choice in other scenarios as well, but people have less of a set ideology, which is why, sure, Dianne Morales and Maya Wiley voters may put Stringer second, but maybe even they put someone like Yang second, despite their ideological differences. Maybe a Sean Donovan voter or a Scott Stringer voter puts someone like Eric Adams second. So really, you know, it depends. It's not, people aren't voting as blocks, and things are really going to vary depending on who you ask, what kind of demographic that voter is, and a number of different factors here. And so looking at those polls, we can see a clear story there. But speaking on the strategy for each campaign, we can look at the Yang campaign first, who has really targeted the Orthodox Jewish voters. Of course, many people who are active on Twitter would see that he has been very heavily criticized by many people because of his tweet about Israel, but that is in part because of his, trying to get support from Orthodox Jewish people. And of course, Israel and Jewish people are not the same thing, but a lot of these Orthodox Jewish people are heavily Republican and do support Israel a lot as well. And so Yang has targeted the Jewish vote a lot, particularly the Hasidic sects in Borough Park. And what kind of confuses me about this is that these groups are the most Republican voting bloc in New York City. Out of all of the voters, they're the most Republican voting bloc. And to show you just how Republican it is, these are the areas with Orthodox Jewish communities. I mean, these areas are like over 90% Republican. So I honestly don't really know why Andrew Yang is targeting these voters. Because number one, they're a smaller demographic. Number two, they're a heavily Republican demographic, and you have close primaries in New York City. So people are going to have to change their registration to Democrat just to vote for Yang. And I don't really see that as a scenario that's actually that likely to happen. But if we do look at the demographics here, we can see that there's a number of groups that Yang probably should be targeting. And Hispanic voters and black voters are probably the number one and number two in that scenario because they do make up large portions of New York City. Black voters, of course, make up a very large voting bloc in the Brooklyn area. Hispanic areas make a very large voting bloc in the Bronx area and the North Manhattan area. Asian voters are also quite important. And, of course, Yang got the endorsement of Grace Meng, who is the representative from the 6th Congressional District, which does cover a lot of these Asian areas. And so if I were Yang, I'd be targeting Asian voters. I think that there is a lot of appeal for people trying to vote for the first Asian mayor, and I think amongst Asians, especially those that have been targeted because of COVID and the anti-Asian hate, I think they would probably like Yang. But Yang doesn't seem to be targeting them to the extent that he probably should. And if you're also Yang, you probably want to target more low-income voters, more working-class voters, because if you want to make your message around helping poor people, giving people a universal basic income, then you should be targeting people who are working class and would be most helped by those policies. But I don't really see that as a policy that's happening at the moment. So if I were Yang, I would focus on the working-class groups as well as Asian groups. I think that they can help you get over the finish line. Of course, they can't do everything for you, but I think that it would certainly help him, and I think that it would probably give him a better chance of winning because, as you can see, he's been falling recently, and if he doesn't do something about that, he's probably going to end up losing to Eric Adams, who has been gaining steam lately. But it's a very interesting primary. I'm going to continue to cover it because I am that interested in it, and it's going to be my mayor. And, of course, this is one of the few elections that we actually do have in 2021, and like I said, I will continue to cover it. I'll probably make one or two more videos about it before the election, which is just over a month from now. But again, we will see what happens. So thank you for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But again, guys, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys later.